All right. Happy New Year, Mr. Roderick.
Happy New Year.
Now, I'll go straight to the concerns and key points that the world want to hear, particularly Africans and African American, as well as American in general. What makes Black Americans different to Africans, to your views or to your understanding?
All right, there's a few things that make Africans different from African Americans.
Okay.
The first thing and the most noticeable thing is his history, it's historical, basically. Africans remained in Africa,
right?
And African Americans or African Caribbean people, they were taken from Africa in the past.
Correct.
And then they were subjected to slavery.
Okay.
And after slavery, they were subjected to cruelty and a brainwashing, and their language, their history were taken away from them. So African Americans and Western African Caribbeans, they don't really have their history. Their history is gone. They couldn't tell you who their ancestors are or where their ancestors are from. The only thing that they could tell you is that they're African descent. Whereas Africans, they can do the same thing white people could do.
Yes.
They could trace their history hundreds, maybe thousands of years back to where their ancestors came from. And they could tell you in great detail, about their history. That's one. The second thing is, over the years, African Americans have been subjected to like a brainwashing by the government.
Yes.
And basically they have been grouped into areas called ghettos.
Yes.
And there's absolutely, I wouldn't say there's absolutely no way, but there's a period of time where there was no way that they could get out of these ghettos. They were trapped. And over time, as they fought and gained civil rights, African Americans became very successful.
Yes.
In athletics, the arts, and all kinds of stuff, even in inventing and different stuff.
Okay. Now, along those lines, we have seen a lot of highly educated Africans in the United States, Europe as well, so in the Western world, who understand the democracy views as well as how it should benefit to African people. We've seen this past few weeks in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Congolese presidential elections going on, and one of the underdog gentlemen, Mr. Martin Fayulu, coming out of the West, the US, as well as educated in France. Now that the population is behind a man of such, with a charisma of Nelson Mandela, but at the same time facing the dictatorship on the ground, you as an entrepreneur, as well as a Black man, what could be your views? What potentially can be your input as an American, if America should consider this and get the bridge into democracy for a country as such with this amount of minerals? So I want to hear from an elite Black man who's watching this particular situation of the Democratic Republic of Congo from afar.
All right. If the Democratic Republic of Congo is a current dictatorship, or is it a dictatorship trying to take over?
It is a current dictatorship by Mr. Kabila for 18 years now. So
that's a conflict of name, right?
Correct.
It's called the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's a dictatorship, so it's not a democrat, basically, right?
Yes.
Usually, the United States government would try to interfere,
yes,
with places that have dictatorship.
Yes.
And they'll try to dethrone dictators. They've done it with Saddam Hussein and other dictators throughout the past. However, they're not interfering with that dictatorship.
Correct.
And of course, the reason why is because they probably have some sort of financial, you know what I'm saying, thing going on, something behind the scenes that's benefiting the U.S., that they don't need to touch that dictatorship, right? As a Black American, most Black Americans probably won't get involved with anything like that. Most Black Americans, they want to stay here, home safe. They don't want to invest, get involved, or do anything having to do with the Congolese Democratic. So it's just the truth. A lot of Americans don't even know about the history or know what's going on over there to get involved.
And what could you say now to the Congolese naturalized Americans who have the benefit and the advantage in a situation as such? Couldn't it be as an opportunity for the Congolese American to get involved and probably step in to lead the country in a neutral transitional government with Western mentality that would benefit to the population?
Yes. I think, Congolese, people from Congo, just as yourself, should get involved. They should try to bring their country back to the glory that it once was in the past. If they don't do that, it's a crime, not to go back and support your country, especially if they're being backed. The politicians that's about to gain power has a democratic thought process.
Yes.
And he's about to go into power. They should find it as an opportunity to go back and invest in their own country, invest in their people, and invest in business and take the Western way of thought into Congo. The one thing about Africa that bothers me, and not just Congo, but all of Africa, it seems like technology just skipped over.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Not saying that there's not technology in Africa, anything like that.
Yes.
It seems as if it skipped over Africa.
Okay.
Some of the benefits that's everywhere else in the world kind of like skipped over Africa. And I'm like, was that done on purpose? Or was it voluntarily? Because Africa has a lot of traditional roots. Okay.
Now, what is your advice in that regards? Because you have a better understanding of technology, and as a Black American, seeing what has skipped over Africa that should be utilized to change the land and then the landscape. What advice could you give in a mix of this? Because this is being broadcasted, it's news, and anything that comes out of news potentially will benefit the people from the region.
Well, the best thing that I could say is that it's not a form of assimilation. Some people think when they take up technology, they're being assimilated or they're being changed to assimilate or form to something that they're against. Technology is here and it's not going to go anywhere. So they should embrace it, and they should use that to take power in their own, country. Okay. They should not deflect it, because the more they deflect technology, is the more that they're going to fall behind, and the more that they're going to stay in the area that they are. But if they embrace the technology, and people from Congo that's here, that are educated and that have learned, and they invest in a country that has an abundance of resources, an abundance of everything, they could become wealthy themselves.
Okay. Now, along the same lines, America is a melting pot, so is Africa. But I don't think that Americans, the average American, have an idea of the African melting pot. We've seen lately the involvement in the taking over of Chinese over Africa. What is your advice? What is your observation, and what is your understanding as a Black American?
Well, the average person in the world and doesn't know that Africa is a melting pot. The only melting pot that most people understand that Africa has is through invasion. The Dutch, the French, the Spaniards, all those people have invaded and basically forcefully embedded themselves in Africa and created a type of melting pot where you have different cultures and things of that sort in Africa. But without that, Africa does have a lot of different people, you know, and a lot of different type of races, but they're all African without having that. And the Chinese today, they're doing a technical invasion of Africa. You know, they're buying up resources, they're buying up land, and they're paying the Africans more than they would normally make. So they're accepting them with welcome arms, similar to how they accepted the Dutch with open arms, and then the Dutch kind of invaded and took over everything. Kind of the same concept, but without all the killings and stuff like that. So the Chinese, they don't have the land, the resources, or any of that. Yeah. All they have is people, right? Mm-hmm. So genius or smart, the Chinese, to go into Africa and take up the land, the resources, and do the same thing that they're doing in China, but in Africa. So in the next few years, Africa will be probably one of the biggest manufacturing continents in the world,
but
versus China.
And I get you, and then I see that. Don't you think that educated Africans can anticipate that as they see Chinese taking over, and then African are just sitting and then watching and then just relaxing? Wouldn't it be the opportunity as well for elite Africans to stand up, rise, and do the same thing by taking over the continent that has been invaded by Chinese, and then bring balance, yeah, even though it's a financial power and an investment battle?
Yeah. It would be in the best interest of educated Africans, even African Americans, to team up, put their financial resources together, yes, and do the same thing that the Chinese are doing. The only difference is the Chinese has government ties, political ties, and they have billions of dollars in resources. So it's they would have to start small and then grow from there. And then the other thing is the corruption that's involved in Africa. You know, the Chinese know who to contact, who to bribe, who to pay off, and they have the resources, the financial resources to do so. Whereas an average African American such as myself wouldn't have those contacts. It'd be a little bit more difficult. So the best way for them to do it is to basically, the people from Congo that are here, that are educated, is to team up with as many African Americans as possible, throw their resources together, and then contact their resources in Congo and see if they could surpass or invest in some of the things that the Chinese would invest in, okay, before they invest in it, and then take over that way.
Right. Now, what is American dream to you?
The American dream is to own property. You know, property is the American dream, to own a piece of the land and so forth. So if you have real estate or anything like that, you could basically become wealthy if you know how to invest and manage your money and so forth. The American dream has always been real estate. They say when someone buys a home here, they say you have a part of the American dream. Okay. You know what I'm saying? You got a piece of the American dream. So it's always been real estate. No matter what anybody say, they'll say, hey, you know, to be a millionaire, to be successful, to do this, it's always been real estate. It's always been land, property.
The American founding fathers defined life as the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. And I would say that as a Congolese American, Congolese are people as well as American and Congolese people have also to pursue happiness in life. So we see here a Congolese highly educated person by the name of Martin Fayulu, worked 20 years for the American Petroleum, running as a presidential candidate in the Congo. Mm-hmm. And the man have drawn rallies and masses of crowds, such as Nelson Mandela, he's looked up to as a figure, as the face of the new change into the Congo. But then again, the Congolese presidential elections have been chaos, hasn't been free as America expected or fair. If the elections had to start over, would that be a good thing? What is your take in the mix of chaotic elections where corruption still play the same card?
If the elections were to start over, you're gonna have a whole bunch of conflict and a whole bunch of dispute and a whole bunch of people saying that it's unfair. And it's gonna mainly come from whoever's in power, especially if the election was favoring that person. And then they'll say if the Americans got involved and the Americans tainted the election.
What would you think of a neutral, transitional government, sort of temporary government of neutral people that have nothing to do with the current regime to balance things on the ground?
Let me ask you a question. Who would be that neutral power?
It could be me. No, I'm just kidding. I look at it as the Congolese from the diaspora could team up with church and some other elite in the country who never ran the government with understanding of democracy, and possibly within a short period of time to get to where the same candidates and possibly other outsiders could have came 2 years from now to run under no structures.
That makes sense. And you say there's a current dictatorship right now.
Correct. Because a dictator cannot organize elections to lose.
Exactly. So if a dictator knew that this was happening, what would that dictator do in a country like Congo? He will block that. He will stop that. But if
the
violence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So now people are scared. So it's a really hard thing for the average American and the average Congolese to do without having fear, or without having some sort of rebellion, or without having some sort of violence involved. In order to do this, especially against a dictatorship, you're gonna have to have outside help, and it has to be from an outside government. It'll be significantly hard for the average person to do.
So basically the European Union and the United States, so to speak, has got to step in, the United Nations, and kind of offer support.
They got to have the support,
rather the country in that direction.
Yeah, because if it's a traditional dictator or a dictatorship, it's going to be a lot of killings, a lot of deaths, a lot of all that stuff, And that's a traditional dictator, because that's how dictators think.
Gotcha.
They'll take out any threat that'll take them out of power.
Gotcha. So can we summarize and then perhaps conclude that in the end of the day, it comes down to Congolese to fight for what is theirs, no matter what?
If they're willing to sacrifice their life, yeah.
And that's the only way they can see change, right?
With great sacrifice comes great reward, and that came from thousands and thousands of years ago. From great philosophers. With great sacrifice comes great reward, but if there's no sacrifice, then there's no change, there's no reward. Einstein says that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. If you do the same thing as it's been done in the past, you're not going to get a new result. It's just going to be the same thing. So due to certain circumstances, if you want change, especially in the dictatorship, you're going to have sacrifices, and you're going to have to risk lives in order to get change. But you have to be smart when you do it, because the dictator has power, people, army, all that. So I don't think the average Congolese or the average American or African American could do that solely by himself. You're gonna need the support of some sort of outside government.
Thank you for your time. Once again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.